heck happened to the Octarians? What does Judd have to do with the whole thing? Could this be someone we already know of, or someone completely new? Did I leave the oven on? Oh no! What role do the Squid Sisters have in this story mode? How can little Buddy gobble up that weird ooze like that? Are the rest of the salmon okay? What is this? Wait, DJ Octavio is back? Who caused all of this? Hello everyone. It feels good getting the good old theory organs moving again. Hopefully y'all are doing well. Some of the OGs of the channel remember when I made a poll for if I should do a theory like this back in February when the game was first announced. Then I didn't do it for a couple of months. I was gonna get around to it until I started hearing rumors of another Nintendo Direct. And thank goodness I didn't. But in the trailer, we get tons of juicy info, both from the multiplayer and in the single player. The multiplayer has been analyzed to heck and back, but there doesn't seem to be as much buzz circling around the single player, so let us take a crack at it, shall we? Now going into this trailer, I had next to no clue what to expect from it. All I wanted for was for this bloke to not be one of the main villains 3 times in a row. So towards the end of it, when I saw him, my mind was basically like, No, not again, don't do this again, Octavio, no! After looking at the art for the single player campaign and Octavio's attire with the Vlogger Life GoPro, I'm pretty sure that's not him or anything. In Splatoon 2's art, he was the very ominous and mysterious tentacle to the left of a very interesting foe. Now back before I saw any news of the Direct, I did narrow down that the villain of Splatoon 3 was either going to be Octavio again, Tartar again, or Mr. Grizz, which by extension could be someone we know of already, or a possibly new character. With Octavio out the picture, that leaves us with the 2 options in Tartar and Mr. Grizz, right? I was wondering if Tartar had something to do with this, because not only is he the lone character other than Judd with a known direct connection to the long-forgotten humans, but he's also the only character who had manufactured stuff like the fuzzy ooze we see in the trailer, with that being the primordial ooze from the Octo expansion. This ooze was a substance that created the sanitized Octolings, a similar zombified species under his guidance. But then while watching the ending of the Octo expansion, after he pulls off the veil on what he is and provocally Kamehamehas him into oblivion, he says the following: Professor, our reunion beckons. From this quote here, I was able to infer 2 different things. First is that Tartar is basically out of the picture. Unless his AI was downloaded somewhere in Alterna, which I doubt, he malfunctioned and quite literally went into the light. Secondly, if the professor was still around, he probably could have had a plan for Tartar's AI, or even better, found him or Judd near the bustling Inkopolis, and Judd wouldn't have needed to clone himself from the time span of Splatoon 1 to 2, but here we are now. There hasn't been a real symbol of his or any human's presence. I know a lot of people have been wanting the professor to be Mr. Grizz, but if that was the case, he still could have done something with Tartar or Judd. Okay, so with those 2 options gone, and most of the rest of the cast either seeming like extras or genuinely positive in intent, there was one character that feels so devious because he is so mysterious, and that character is Mr. Grizz. Now this guy we know next to nothing about. We don't know a specific reason to the point of his company, other than possibly helping the future of Inkopolis. Heck, we don't even know what the guy... I think he's a guy, even that could just be a masquerade. Mr. Grizz is an ominously anonymous figure that claims to be helping you out in an eerily similar way to how Tartar did in the Octo expansion, before he wanted to blend you up into a cephaloprotein shake. Also, I just have to point this out, as other people have done in the past, in case you haven't heard it. Do you sense the similarities? This will be the 2nd time they've hinted at an antagonist like they did at the end of Splatoon 2's story mode trailer. If the past is any indication of the future, Mr. Grizz would have at least some involvement in this story mode. But that leaves us with another question. Who is Mr. Grizz? Now, I actually had 2 thoughts come into my mind when thinking of Mr. Grizz. Either they were a character that we already knew of that had a darker side between 2 and 3, or a completely new character that we've never seen before that also may not be Mr. Grizz and just a new antagonist in general. My first thought for Mr. Grizz is that could have possibly been Marina. I basically dwindled down the suspects to someone who was smart enough to make all this stuff, who was around when the primordial ooze was around, and who would even have a shred of will to do something like this. I dwindled it down to Marina because of those 2 prior points, and the fact that she seems eerily self-doubtful during some of her Splatfest dialogue. If it was her, it would kinda serve as a reason to do this. I know that she was on Team Werewolf for the 4th Splatoon 2 Splatfest as well, so that could have had something to do with the fuzzy aesthetic of the single player and the furry Octarians. Also, while looking at the poster for clues again, my eyes caught the mask in between the characters. I did a bit of research and watched a video on it, but I figured out that the masks on the bottom right and bottom left were two rivaling spirits in Japanese folklore, with the one up top representing someone who's in between the two cultures. Let me know in the comments which one this is. I've heard some talks that could be a Hanya mask used to represent a vengeful being, but I'm not certain on what the heck this thing is. Wait. But while Mr. Grizz could be a returning character, it might be more likely that they could be someone completely new as well. And if that's the case, you gotta wonder what intentions they would have. If it was Marina or some character already known in the series, it could be the usual, I'm not like the other girls, I have a dark side. But if it's someone new, then we have no clue what their purpose is. Now, hear me out. There is a possibility that Mr. Grizz could be a bear or bear-fascinated character. If the radio has literally any clues on what Mr. Grizz is like, it's either that he is related to, or is fascinated by the should-be-extinct bears. I joked about this in my video about the emotional cycle of Splatoon 3 players, which you should definitely watch after this, but some of Splatoon 2 Salmon Easter eggs are definitely references to bears. The star Polaris that the last Salmon stage, Ruins of Arc Polaris, is based on, is in the Ursa Minor constellation, which is a bear. There are signs and bear tracks on the ground, which really make me think he's a bear or something like it. The Octarian's fur could very much be grizzly bear fur. I mean, it was either going to be that or the cat fur given the blueprints of Judd, which gives us a nice little selection, not to mention it's not like the bears are the only predators of salmon. They also have several predators like cod, seals, and sharks. But bears were the ones that were chosen. I was looking at a couple of leaks and other Easter eggs online to get any clues, and some of them seemed partially correct, but there are other portions that were very out of proportion. Mammalia is literally the class of animal that we are all from. Y'all, come on, did you guys fail Hunter's bio too? I mean, and I feel like it may be a bit too soon to say we're going to space or anything, but it could be that Mr. Grizz or some entity associated with him could have been used as a test subject by humans before they flung themselves into space. Some test subjects in the past included dogs, mice, and apes, so perhaps a small little bear cub was next on the queue for testing, then humans would leave the planet with whatever technology and equipment they used on the bears. Of course, this didn't happen and the humans were wiped out by the rising tides. Alterna stands as what was probably a base of operations to launch people into space, surrounded by a barrier to either protect it in the frigid climate or from a possible threat to the poles. I know there was something about a nuke hitting the South Pole back in one of the Splatoon comics, but I don't know if this is even canon or not. If not, it could just be the prior, but the latter does serve as some extra brain food for you. You probably start off in those warmer climates where we see Captain Cuttlefish and DJ Octavio, but eventually have to go down to Alterna for a greater threat, which is exactly where the Squid Sisters show up. The more exotic areas we see, on the other hand, are probably just some of the levels. If it does end up being Mr. Grizz, either as a character we already know or something else, it definitely would explain why he really wanted the Salmonids gone in Splatoon 2. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but way back in the distant land of 2020, there was a Salmon Run related picture circling around that had the tiny little text, "Save our salmons" in the ripples. Had the real life pandemic not come around, this might have been more directly linked to Splatoon 3, as the game's development wouldn't have been interrupted like a bunch of games unfortunately were over the past year or so. This was probably a hint that the salmonid population was rapidly dwindling. He could have tried to not only kill them off, but also their offspring to make sure they didn't even have a chance to regrow their population. Mr. Grizz could have been lurking throughout these maps away from any prying eyes except the salmonids in Splatoon 2 to further take them out, observing those working for him from afar. Typically, dirt tracks erode with time and, high tides washing them away every 5 minutes, so these are probably remotely fresh. In addition to being part of a now endangered species, because Little Buddy hadn't spawned like the other, more aggressive salmonids that we know from the trailer, we're able to look after the little guy and not have him, chew our ears off. But the final question is, what might be this villain's final goal, Mr. Grizz or not? The goal would simply be to repopulate the world with a mammal-like dominant race like it used to be during the time of the humans, seemingly under the guidance of one who is unknown to us. This new race will replace the old Inklings and Octolings that we know of, using the power from the Zapfish that we saw in the trailer, and perhaps the power of the golden eggs Mr. Grizz had took. The latter perhaps being another reason that Little Buddy is also fine with consuming the ooze, because one of the components to make it could either be the salmonid DNA or the golden golden egg's power. Furthermore, this will also explain the shots of Judd and the dried out squid as a means of finding out either the DNA of one or the other, or how to genetically modify the two of them to form something greater. But hey, that theory is but a splat theory. Let me know what you think will happen in Splatoon 3 story mode. Let me know in the comments, and remember to leave a like and subscribe to Outstar716 for more content on Splatoon 2 and other things gaming, such as the playlist you see on screen right now. See you all next time.